Gonzaga's 9th, 10th, and 11th guys look like superstars against a quality mid-major team on Friday. A great sign of things to come this season.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome in the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, the Zags cruised past UMass-Lowell on Friday evening. We're going to give you a quick breakdown of that game before getting you ready for tonight's big-time battle between Gonzaga and San Diego State on the road at the Viejas Arena. Jam-packed episode to get to all of that. We're going to start talking about what we saw from Mark Few's club on Friday evening at the McCarthy Athletic Center against the UMass-Lowell Riverhawks. Gonzaga cruised to an easy 113-54 victory on Friday evening. This looked like the kind of game where Gonzaga plays a Mississippi Valley State or a Texas Southern or Jackson State, or a team that tends to finish somewhere between 320 and 360 in the KenPom rankings at the end of the year. For people who have never heard of UMass-Lowell, this is the first time Gonzaga has ever played them. This is a team that has only been at the Division I level for about a decade. It kind of tracks that this would be that type of game. However, coming into the game, KenPom had the UMass-Lowell Riverhawks at 125th in his rankings, the team that won 22 games last year, that returned like 80% of their minutes from a team that won 22 games and was basically one bad half away from making the NCAA tournament, being the auto bid out of the America East Conference. Instead, they fell to Vermont, who has kind of dominated that conference. But that's a key reminder for this game. Gonzaga blasted a team that is not nearly as bad as those teams that they tend to play this time of year, like the Jackson States and whatnot. Now we'll see. Obviously, it's possible UMass-Lowell continues to struggle this year and maybe was a bit overinflated in where they were in the KenPom rankings, but that shouldn't take away from what was a remarkable performance from the Zags on Friday. Lineup change. Michael Ajayi replaced Ben Gregg in the starting lineup. That's something we suspected may happen at some point. I think it happened a little sooner than I thought, not because it wasn't warranted, but more because Mark Few tends to not be very quick to make starting lineup changes. But I'm guessing there was some conversations about this, and Ben was happy to take a different role on this team. He's been familiar with coming off the bench, and frankly, Michael has just been better than Ben up to this point in the season. I think he's a better rebounder. He's a better three-point shooter, although they're both very good in that area. I think Ben's probably a bit of a stronger low post defensive player, and in certain matchups, maybe that will come into play, but it wasn't going to be relevant in this game against UMass-Lowell, so we see Michael end up replacing Ben in that lineup. Some star performances, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the keys we had coming into this game and how they ended up playing out on Friday. Khalif Battle was outstanding in this one, 21 points for him. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals. He was 7 of 10 from the field, 4 of 4 from the three-point line, 3 of 3 from the free throw line. He had another windmill dunk. There was a stretch in the second half of this. I mean, Gonzaga dominated from the opening tip until the end of the game, but there was a stretch in particular in the second half, kind of right before UMass-Lowell officially threw in the towel and before Jun Seok-Yeo and Ismaila Diagne and some of Gonzaga's subs came into the game, where Khalif Battle scored a bunch of points in a row. Dusty Stromer had back-to-back dunks. They were just getting steals left and right. I mean, it was just a completely dominant performance from this team on both ends of the floor. Ryan Nembhard, once again, 13 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers, and 3 steals for him through 3 games this season. Again, every team Gonzaga has played came into that game 125th or higher at KenPom. Gonzaga has played 3 teams that are in the top 125 at KenPom, and Ryan Nembhard has a 30-2 assist-to-turnover ratio. 30 assists, 2 turnovers, both which came in the first game of the season against Baylor. He had 11 assists, 2 turnovers in that game, 11 assists and 0 turnovers against Arizona State, and then 8 assists and 0 turnovers against UMass-Lowell. Pretty much the only reason he didn't get a double-double in this one is because they didn't play a lot of the starters late in the second half of this game. It's exactly what Mark Few and the Zags wanted. They don't have to play the starters big minutes because they got a big game 2 days later tonight against San Diego State, so not having to play those guys a lot of minutes was critical in this game. Dusty Stromer was great, 11 points, 3 boards, 3 steals off the bench. Missed his 2 3-point attempts, but was 5 of 5 from the free throw line. Nolan Hickman, 14 points. Braden Huff, 13 points, 5 boards in 17 minutes for him. Now I want to talk about the keys that we had coming into this game and kind of how those things played out on Friday. Key number 1 was getting the starting front court going, which we specified when talking about the starting front court that we were talking about, Graham Ike and Ben Gregg. Of course, that did not end up being the starting front court in that game. I will start with Ike. We still haven't seen Graham Ike be Graham Ike. I am not yet concerned about this, but I know people are starting to kind of feel that way. He was 3 of 8 from the field in this game. He was 5 of 6 from the free throw line. He had 11 points and 5 boards, which doesn't sound like a huge line, but that's 11 points and 5 rebounds in 16 minutes. And the 16 minutes were not because of foul trouble like it was against Arizona State. It was because they didn't need to play him big minutes and they wanted to have him fully rested and ready to go against San Diego State. So still don't love 3 of 8 from the field. They were mostly good looks, a few that he kind of rushed or just kind of threw up there that weren't great looks. But I still think that the jury's still out on Graham. It's not like he's going to just magically lose the talent that he had last year, but the slow start continues for Graham, and it would have been nice to see him have a little bit more of an efficient night in this one. Ajayi had 6 points in 16 minutes as Gregg's replacement. Again, they didn't need to play him much, so they didn't. Ben Gregg had the best game of his season so far coming off the bench, 7 points, 10 rebounds in 20 minutes of action. He was 3 of 7 from the field. He was 0 of 2 from 3. He still hasn't made a three-pointer this year. That's unique. That's odd. The guy was a 37% three-point shooter last year and the year before that. He's going to find the shot. They're good looks. He just hasn't found one that hits the bottom of the net yet. I suspect that we'll see him start to hit some outside shots as soon as tonight against San Diego State. But yeah, still an area that we haven't seen from him. But 7 points and 10 boards in 20 minutes off, just still a solid line for him. The key number 2 was wondering whether UMass-Lowell would attempt to run with Gonzaga. They didn't really try to, but this team could not get anything going in the half court. They finished the game with 6 assists and 25 turnovers. Like I said, there was a stretch in the second half where basically as soon as UMass-Lowell crossed half court, Gonzaga was taking the ball away from them. Stromer had 3 steals. Like we said, Nembhard had 3 steals. This team was just absolutely crushing them as soon as they crossed half court. 16 total steals for the Zags in this one. UMass-Lowell had no chance to really get out in transition and really no chance to stop Gonzaga from getting out in transition because they were getting a lot of those steals just past half court. So once they get a steal, once they get that ball pushed up in transition, at that point, there's really nothing you can do to stop them. Key number 3 was how Gonzaga will look defending the three-point line. Pretty darn good. 3 of 16 was UMass-Lowell's line from beyond the arc. In this one, that's about 19%. Again, Gonzaga defensively it was an absolute masterclass performance from them. 16 steals. UMass-Lowell, when they did get shots, was not able to contribute. They weren't getting offensive rebounds. They weren't getting second chance opportunities. They couldn't get out in transition. Their half-court offense was completely stalled out. Yes, Gonzaga was bigger and more physical and was just able to kind of out-muscle and out-athlete them in a lot of ways. But we've seen Gonzaga struggle with these types of teams. Again, as a reminder, this team would have, at the time of this game, was right in between Santa Clara and LMU in terms of the WCC standings. Gonzaga struggled with those teams in the past. They struggled with Santa Clara last year, so it's certainly a promising sign that Gonzaga looks so good against this team. Whether UMass-Lowell stays in that conversation in the 125-150 range or not, we'll see if that sticks. But this was a team coming in that had some momentum that looked like they could at least put up a little bit of a fight, and Gonzaga just absolutely thrashed them on both ends of the floor. Key number 4 was whether we'd see some of the deeper bench players. Absolutely we did, and it was the most fun part of this game. 9, 10, 11 in Gonzaga's rotation. 9, 10, 11 is outside of Gonzaga's rotation. They played 8-man rotation, the starting 5, and then Ben Gregg, Braden Huff, Dusty Stromer coming off the bench. But Jun Seok-Yeo, Emmanuel Innocenti, and Ismaila Diagne all got minutes in this game and all did awesome, awesome things. Yo, in particular, he played 8 minutes. He had 8 points, an assist, and a steal. He was 3 of 4 from the field. He was 1 of 3 from the three-point line. He looked 1 of 2 from the three-point line. He looked outstanding. He hit the taco three, the 10th made three-pointer, which got the entire crowd tacos. It was a crossover step-back three-pointer. It looked incredibly slick. He was great getting out in transition. He's looked very good in the very limited minutes that he's gotten so far this year. He also played, and I've talked about this before, kind of trying to gauge the order 9, 10, 11. Does it really matter? No, especially since all three of these guys play different positions. But Yo played 8 minutes. Diagne played 7 minutes. But Emmanuel Innocenti played 15 minutes. I think that's a pretty clear, he also was the only one who played in the first half. It's a pretty clear sign that he is higher in the pecking order right now, also probably viewed more as a immediate piece for next year's roster. He had 2 points, 4 assists, 2 boards, 2 steals in this one. That's the kind of line I think you're going to see from him. Not going to score a ton of points, but he's going to contribute in other ways. He's going to play good defensively. He's going to distribute the ball well. These are the kind of things that he's very good at. So this was a very, I think, quintessential Emmanuel Innocenti type line. And then Ismaila Diagne had 5 points and a pair of blocks in this one. He caught an alley-oop from Innocenti for an easy bucket. He had another easy one around the rim as well. He had two fouls in 7 minutes, as well as the 2 blocks. That's going to be an area of significant growth for Diagne. If he were to play big minutes this year, honestly, he wouldn't be able to. He would probably get in foul trouble at Efton Reed levels of getting in foul trouble if he were playing real minutes for this team. But his getting these small amounts of minutes in games like this will help him learn how officials call games at this level and kind of what he can and can't do using his body and his frame. And so I think that's a good experience for him. And then key number 5 was about the walk-ons. Joe Few did not play in this game. Was not suited up. Not sure if there's an injury there or any situation there, but we did see the 2 other walk-ons that we suspected might get into game action this year. Joaquim Reyes-Moore, a.k.a. Q, as well as junior college transfer Noah Holland. Reyes-Moore in his first game, it took Joe Few a long time to score his first field goal, and Q said, that's not going to be me. I'm going to get my first bucket and the first opportunity that I get. He took 4 shot attempts in 2 minutes for the Zags. He finally scored. I think it was his second attempt. He was on the baseline or on the sideline, pump faked, drove past a guy on the baseline, stopped, pump faked again, got a defender in the air, went around the basket, finished with his left hand. It was beautiful. If you haven't seen the highlights, it's all over the Instagram account and the Twitter account for the Zags men's basketball page. The way that the bench reacts is my favorite part. They're going crazy for Q for hitting this bucket. It was a really, really fun moment for him in this game. Noah Holland did not score, but he did have 2 rebounds. He also had 2 fouls in 4 minutes of action. Not overly concerned about that. Would have been nice to see him get his first bucket, but it sounds like it's happening at some point this year as he was able to suit up in this one. Did not see Graydon Lemke or Cade Orness, and I don't think that we will this year. Well, folks, San Diego State, we're turning our attention to the Aztecs. They've only played 1 D1 game so far this season. We're going to talk about whether the Zags will avenge last year's home loss and win on the road at the Viejas Arena. We're previewing that team coming up here in just a second. But first, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate fan, it's not just a hobby, it's a way of life. And it takes a lot of energy to power through all-day pregame events, dancing to Zombie Nation, or sweating through some of those close games. That's why they've created the Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us. The fans who are the first in the parking lot and who are the last to leave. We see you. And you know what gives us the fan fuel this week? Getting ready for a late game, Gonzaga San Diego State, 7 p.m. Pacific time. I know many of you listening are out in the New York area, out on the East Coast. Some of you are overseas. It's going to be a really late tip for those of you out there. And 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. So whether you're prepping for the big tailgate, ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. And that's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. It's available on 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from that game against UMass-Lowell on Friday evening to get you folks ready for tonight's battle at the Viejas Arena, Gonzaga, San Diego State, November 18th, 7 p.m. Pacific time. This game will be on the CBS Sports Network. Should be a channel most people are getting if you have Fubo or YouTube TV or anything like that. Not as much of a mystery in terms of how to watch this game, so that'll be good for Gonzaga fans going forward. The return of the home-and-home series between Gonzaga and San Diego State. Of course, the game was in Spokane last year, one of those mini early season games that Gonzaga dropped. They lost to the Aztecs 84-74 again at home. That was a tough game. The Santa Clara game a few weeks later was kind of the when Gonzaga hit that low point and then bounced back and dominated from there on out. In that game for San Diego State against Gonzaga, Reese Dixon-Waters had 22 points. Jaden Ledee had 20 points. Darion Trammell came off the bench to have 17. Now, this year, Reese Dixon-Waters is hurt. He's not going to be back in time for this game on Monday night. Jaden Ledee and Darion Trammell are both gone. Also gone from last year's team, Micah Parrish, who is at Ohio State, Elijah Saunders, who is at Virginia, Lamont Butler, who is at Kentucky. This is a very new look team. And right now for Gonzaga, this game is not only about avenging the loss last year and picking up a win against a quality Mountain West opponent, it's kind of about establishing a rivalry. Gonzaga and San Diego State are going to be the cream of the crop of the new look Pac-12 after this upcoming season. They are going to be the two biggest basketball brands in that league. Even if the Pac-12 is able to add Memphis and make some moves, if they do something stunning and somehow convince Creighton to leave the Big East, then sure, maybe there'll be a different thing. I do not think that's going to happen. I think Gonzaga and San Diego State are going to be the two big marquee basketball brands. They already have a history against each other. They've played each other multiple times. There's a little bit of bad blood between the two teams. Like, this is a rivalry, kind of a rivalry budding. And this is the kind of game where I think that could really get established, especially if in back-to-back years, these two teams can hand each other losses on their home floor. That's a really good way to start a rivalry off going forward. Let's meet the Aztecs. They're 2-0 on the year. Their wins are over UC San Diego and Occidental. Occidental is a non-D1 team. UC San Diego was their season opener. They beat them by 5. That team is 113th at KenPom. So that's basically about where UMass-Lowell is, just as a reminder for that situation there. Another note, Seattle U just played UC San Diego and beat them by 13, 84-71. Now, very first game of the year, I think those results can be taken with a little bit more of a grain of salt. For example, Baylor's probably not 38 points worse than Gonzaga. I think we can accept that. And so, for San Diego State, to have only played 2 games, to have one of them have been their season opener for a new look roster, the other one to be against a non-D1 team, it's really hard to kind of know a lot about this team at this point. They're 52nd at KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 113th, but their adjusted defensive efficiency is 16th, the hallmark of Brian Dutcher's programs up to this point. Their tempo is 275th, so they're going to play slow. They're going to grind you out. They're going to defend the heck out of you, and they're going to be okay to not so great on the offensive end. The big story for San Diego State is whether Miles Byrd plays or not. We already mentioned Reese Waters. He is not going to play in this game. He's out until, I think, December, maybe even January with his injury. But Miles Byrd played in the team's opener. He played in their opener, had 20 points, 8 boards, 5 steals, 4 blocks, and 3 assists, but did not play after that. He's only played 1 game. The latest, as I'm recording this on Sunday evening, is that he is still a game time decision for Monday. We've seen quotes from Dutcher that says he's still in a boot, that they're being overly cautious with him, that they're not planning to push him back in a non-conference game unless they feel he's fully ready. That seems to trend towards him likely not playing, but we'll see. He's a 6'7" wing. He's kind of looking like a breakout star. He didn't have a big role for this team, but San Diego State is very good at the next man up type mentality. They have guys waiting in the wings who step into bigger roles when guys graduate or transfer or anything like that. And it feels like Miles Byrd is that kind of bigger wing type that they really covet in that program. And I think he is in line to have a breakout year. Just don't know if he's going to be suiting up tonight or not. The other main things for this team, just not a lot of continuity. Like we said, Darion Trammell is gone, Jaden Ledee is gone, Micah Parrish is gone, Elijah Saunders is gone. This team returns sophomore BJ Davis, who played a small role as a freshman last year. He's averaged 13.5 points through his first 2 games. They get a transfer from FAU. Nick Boyd comes in, 10.5 points, 3.5 assists for him in those first 2 games. He's also shooting 4 of 10 from 3. And then they get a transfer that is familiar to Gonzaga fans, and Wade McKinney III, transfer from San Diego. He's averaging 10.5 points, 2.5 assists, and is 4 of 8 from 3. In fact, in those first 2 games, San Diego State shooting just about 42% from 3. That is an area of strength for this team. Again, with the continued caveat that they have played one Division I team. So a strong three-point shooting performance against a non-D1 school doesn't necessarily give you a full scope of what this team's going to look like. But there stands to reason that this is going to be a quality three-point shooting team this year. They also have a redshirt freshman, Magoon Gwath, is a name to watch. 7-footer, 205 pounds, so he's a little skinny. He's kind of more of a wing type is how they've described him, but he has been a shot-blocking machine to start the season. 3 blocks in his 23 minutes against UC San Diego, although he only scored 1 point. 4 blocks in 18 minutes against Occidental alongside 16 points in that one. He's a big, very, very athletic kid, and I think that's going to be a big storyline in this game. That's what I want to talk about coming up. What does Gonzaga need to do to avoid losing both games in this home-and-home series with San Diego State? We're going to discuss our keys to a Zags victory coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, get ready to tackle the college hoops action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Right now, FanDuel's odds favor the Zags, 9.5-point favorites tonight against the Aztecs. If Bird doesn't play, and those are still the odds, I am smashing that. I think Gonzaga wins this one by more than that, even in a road environment if Bird is not on the floor. If you like those odds, if you like any of the other odds that they have out on FanDuel, just visit FanDuel.com and you can join today. As a reminder, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Folks, going to live events is the absolute best. Whether it's sporting events, whether it's concerts, whether it's musical theater, comedy shows, and finally, of course, college hoops is back. And I'm looking forward to making a ton of new memories this season. And great news, when you're getting tickets for this year, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Right now, they've still got great deals. Gonzaga, Kentucky, Climate Pledge Arena, the battle in Seattle. Kentucky looked great in that win over Duke. Mark Few, Mark Pope, that's going to be an incredible game. And you can get 2 tickets in the upper deck for just $63 a piece. So, folks, take the guesswork now out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's two tickets to that game for under $100 if you use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, we're closing out this Monday edition of Locked On Zags, talking about the keys to victory for Mark Few's team on the road at the Viejas Arena tonight, 7 p.m. Pacific time, taking on the Aztecs of San Diego State. Key number 1 has been the same throughout the season, but we're gonna highlight it here. Got to get Graham going. You got to get Graham Ike going. He has been off to a slow start this year. Last year, his season really picked up after the game against San Diego State. Now, that game was much further along in the season. It was about the halfway mark. I think it was the final non-conference game outside of Kentucky that Gonzaga played last year. This is, of course, much earlier in the season than that. But it would be pretty nice to get Graham going a little earlier than he did last year. He hasn't looked like himself so far this season. Through 3 games, he's averaging 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. He's just shooting 52% on those 2-pointers. Now, he's only also averaging 16 minutes per game. He didn't play much against Arizona State as Gonzaga rolled with Braden Huff and left Graham on the bench with foul trouble. He didn't play much against UMass-Lowell because Gonzaga did not need him to in that game. So it's still early. The sample size using the stats is kind of limited, but Graham he's missed more shots that he doesn't typically miss, and you can just see he doesn't quite look like himself yet. He's also facing another high upside young freshman rim protector in Magoon Gwath in this game. Now, he's a redshirt freshman, so he's got a little bit more experience than Jaden Quintance, who was at Arizona State, but a player who I think could give Graham some fits. I'd love to see Graham go out, establish himself on the block, get some points around him, maybe get him in foul trouble, make some tough shots, do the things that we haven't seen from him yet this year, but that we know he's capable of from what he was able to do, particularly in the second half last season. Key number 2 for the Zags, lock down the 3-point shot. Currently, Gonzaga is holding its opponents to 22.7% from 3. That is the 10th best rate in the country, according to KenPom. Less than 23% is what opponents are shooting from three against Gonzaga this year. That is incredible. San Diego State is shooting 42% in their 2 games. That's 25th in the country. Something has to give. Unstoppable force, immovable object, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, again, sample sizes are very small. I doubt San Diego State's going to finish the year shooting 42%. I also would be stunned if Gonzaga finished the year holding teams to 23%. So these numbers are going to kind of steady as the year goes on. But what breaks in this game? I suspect that San Diego State is going to whip the ball around when they can, and they're going to try to get Gonzaga in defensive rotation problems. This is an area that is a concern for Gonzaga. Historically, it was a concern in the Arizona State game. If Brian Dutcher, who's a very good coach, can find ways to get this ball movement to create problems for Gonzaga defensively, it could lead to a lot of open looks for the Aztecs. If they're out there knocking down threes, getting that crowd going, that could be a problem for the Zags in this one. Key number 3 is kind of a 2-part key. Take care of the basketball, but also set the tempo. Taking care of the basketball doesn't mean just being complacent in a half-court offense and letting San Diego State dictate the tempo of the game. That's not really what we need to do here. We still want to take care of the basketball, but also push the pace. San Diego State doesn't generate a lot of turnovers. They're a good defensive team in the sense that they're holding teams to some of the longest possessions in all of college basketball. They play good defense. They keep you in front of you. They force you into tough shots, but they're not generating a ton of turnovers. They're not getting a bunch of steals. That's not really their game. So for Gonzaga, who has the most prolific point guard in the country in terms of not turning the basketball over, it is very important to continue that streak. Don't turn the ball over. Don't give them live ball turnovers where they can get momentum, get the crowd going, force Gonzaga into timeouts, things like that. But at the same time, push when you can. San Diego State's not going to let you push. They're going to try everything they can to not let us push the pace. 275th in tempo for San Diego State so far this year. They play slow. They're similar to St. Mary's, not quite as dramatically slow, but they play slow. They also force the other team to play slow. That is going to be their game plan. For Gonzaga, you set the tempo, you push the pace, you force them to get tired, a team that already has some injuries, has some depth issues. You wear them out while still taking care of the basketball. Key number 4, kind of speaking of San Diego State's relatively thin bench, get to the free throw line. Force their bigs to get on the bench in foul trouble, and they're going to have to go to some depth options that they don't really have, especially with some early season injuries. Again, Magoon is a big-time shot blocker, but he's a true freshman. He's only played 2 games, so we don't really know how much of a foul-prone big man that he is, but he's never defended. He has yet to defend anybody like Graham Ike or Braden Huff or even Michael Ajayi or Ben Gregg at the collegiate level. If they can put him on the bench, get him in foul trouble, force the backup bigs to play big minutes. Again, you combine that with pushing the tempo, getting out in transition, you're going to wear this team down. That's a really concrete way to make sure you're leaving San Diego with a victory, is to get, and again, it's not just the bigs. It's not just Graham and Ben going up and under and trying to get contact. It's Khalif Battle, who's exceptional at this, getting him in pick and roll actions, getting him going downhill towards the rim where he can draw contacts, get to the free throw line, do what he does best. Those are critical aspects of this game. And last but not least, you got to tune out the noise. This is Gonzaga's only true road game of the non-conference slate. UConn and UCLA are both listed as semi-road games. In the KenPom data, obviously, UConn at the Madison Square Garden is going to be much more in favor of UConn than Gonzaga, whereas I think the UCLA game may not be as much of a semi-away game. Just in geography, I think that there's probably going to be a good split there, if not a lean for Gonzaga fans. But this is a true road game. No debate about that. This is a true road game for the Zags. And last year, Gonzaga's young players struggled in their first road atmosphere of the season. Against Washington, Dusty Stromer and Braden Huff did not play well. They now have a full year of experience under their belt, and I don't think that those troubles will persist. You look at Gonzaga's additions this year in Khalif Battle and Michael Ajayi, they have dealt with this. They are familiar with this. Ajayi played 1 full D1 season and played 2 years at the junior college level. Battle has been in the Big Ten. He's been in the A10. He was in the SEC last year. Or not the Big Ten, the Big East, excuse me. Either way, he's dealt with it. Ajayi's dealt with it. The rest of Gonzaga's returners have dealt with it. Like, they know how to handle this type of environment. And I think that as long as the young players are ready for it, that's going to be a big part of this game, because you can't go into a game like that and be unprepared for what that looks like. Again, we saw it against Washington last year. We know what that can potentially do. All right, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Special shout out to those everyday listeners, those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball, the Locked On Zags and Locked On College Basketball Discord. We got both of them. But if you want to join, free to join. There's a link in the show notes. We're going to talk throughout the game on the game threads section there, so you can come hang out, chat with us during this game. Thanks again for listening, folks. And until next time, as always, go Zags.